so I don't have to introduce myself. I'm the, as I said, I will cover the thermodynamics aspect, and I promise you real surprises. Okay. Well, actually, I met Peter because he helped us a lot with the instrument I bought. We bought in our lab. This is a DSC, and he's really, you know, for reasons that I don't understand, the Swedish are really top-notch in thermodynamics and building this instrument, and I have this experience since I was very young in Virginia, where together with a Swedish guy, we really started a new program about thermodynamics of liposomes. So the lecture will compose of these slides, and you will see the logo of the GE. Now, no, not anymore GE, because all the calorimeter where I think will go to Malvern. So Malvern is become a major company in the field of analytical tools and physical chemical tools. And then I'll show some new information about the Doxil. So thermodynamics really, as you see here, where is the pointer, really has three fathers, the three gurus that what we have to deal with is Joule. We know all the units, so he's one of the first people, Clausius and Gibbs, and they really have all the major rules that we still use today, you know, and I think this is the basis for all our work. The way you measure, sorry? Yeah, there are many others, but I mean, I use Peter's slides, so I don't want to do any changes in these slides. Basically, we have a calorimeter. I remember a calorimeter since I was in the elementary schools, that people told me you put glucose, you burn it, and you measure how many calories you get out of it. But basically, we measure the flow of heat. And also, we have basically two different techniques. One is isothermal titration calorimetry, which I'll show you a little bit of it, which is a very powerful method related to what we are interested in measure binding, and very important to us measuring CMC. We can measure CMC. And then the differential scanning calorimetry, which is very powerful for also binding, but more what we are dealing with is phase transition and designing a phase diagram, as well as measuring stability. Both are also very important tools to follow biosimilarity or really determine the degree that your product is generic with any other product. So it's really a very powerful tool. Why we talk about microcalorimetry? These are very sensitive instruments. They can measure very small heat, very low level of heat flow. The ITC measure directly changes in heat upon binding, for example, or a point association or dissociation, and the DSC can follow the more things that are relevant to the structure. So it has a very broad dynamic range. We get a lot of information with it. We discuss some of it. And then it is very easy to use. It has one major problem. The instruments are very expensive. And if you want to build a center that have those two instruments, count on about $300,000. But it's worth every penny, I think. Because since I bought the instrument in my lab, which was really not very easy at all, I think these instruments are working almost 7 days a week, and people are competing on it all the time. It's really, you get a lot of information. I'll share some of it with you. We don't have much time. So these are the calorimeter, the ITC, you can see here, and the DSC. Both instruments have many kinds. This is, of course, advertisement to GE, but I'm not going to deal with it more, just to give you the feel. The basic instrument is really very simple. It's just made in a very accurate way. What we have a kind of two cells. One is the reference cell, and the other is the sample cells. And actually, you measure the changes in heat between the two all the time, and you try to make them identical. So by this, you know how much heat either you win or you lose, and you can really, from this, you get the thermograms that I'll show you about that actually describe the process that's going on. That's the scheme, and that's the actual unit. It just protected very, very well in the small difference in about 1 in 10,000th of a degree, so it's very, very, very accurate, the measurement. And that's very critical, of course. So calorimetric has its own language. The graphic description, we call it thermograms. A process that consumes it, we call it an endothermic process, and the thermogram and the peak will be endotherm, and a process which releases it, we call it exothermic, and it results in exotherm. Process can be reversible or irreversible. If it's reversible, it means that we're dealing with a stable structure, a kind of equilibrium. If it's not reproducible, it deals that we're dealing with some metastable structures, and I'll show you an example of these two. They are very, very important. Well, as I said, there are many advantages because, first of all, it's a direct measurement of the heat capacity. Nothing else is involved except the sample, and if you have binding, also the species you want to bind. Almost all the phase transition have enthalpy, and you can also measure the entropy, as I show you later. Once you have enthalpy, you can measure the entropy. There is no optical probe. You don't add anything. There is no labeling, again, and you can use a very turbid solution, which is very, very important for many of the things we are working with, where we get a lot of artifact by it. This is the performance of the ITC. So basically, you can see how the measurement done. It's a simple titrator that you have the reference cell where nothing is done, and you have your sample cell where the reaction is happening, and when there is binding, you can follow the binding with this change in the heat capacity here. You see, it's a microcalorie. You can even go one scale lower. You remember, microcalorie is a very, very low. It's highly, highly sensitive. We talk about nanomolar range of concentration, and you can follow the process. From this, you can calculate the binding and how much heat is involved in the binding, namely the intensity of the binding, the intensity of the interaction, and so on. Well, this is actually, I took it for my course. I teach about it, and you can see the ITC a measurement of measuring a CMC of octaglucoside, a detergent, and it's very nice to follow. You can see this is the change of heat here, and then you can derivatize it, so you get the exactly point of the CMC. And that's how the actual curve looks. So what happening in this process is very simple. We get, once, because of second law of thermodynamic, the amplifier really kind of interfere with the water, and because of this, at a certain point of time where this interference is unbearable for the system, you get the association into micelles, and then there is a gain of energy, and that's actually what you are measuring here. So this, in general, what you can get out of it, this is the classical equation regarding to thermodynamic. You can get the delta G, you can get the delta H, and you can get the delta S if you know the temperature. And here, that's the way we calculate. And so in a way, you can get the heat involved with the changes between, let's say, two different structures, the phase transition, and you also can get the state of order through the entropy and also stoichiometry of binding, for example. Now, the same parameters, you can get also with the DSC. DSC can show you if the process is reversible or not reversible. You can see first and second scan. I'll show you more data about it later. Very powerful tool to compare between different batches. One of the most powerful, it sends very, very small changes in the batches. So you can see here reference lot 1, lot 2, lot 3, and if there were changes, you could see it. So that's a very, very nice tool to study it. Well, it sends a lot of things. For example, if you change chain lengths in a phospholipid when you measure phase transition, or you change a head group, you can easily detect it through this, in this case, endotherm. The thermogram show endotherm because phase transition, when we hit, is followed by, and it's really an endothermic process. So actually, you can get a lot of information, and I think I already said it. And I want to go now more focused on the lipid. So phase transition. You know, phase transition is a very important aspect of most lipid. Phase transition affects a lot by sterol, and this is lecture 7 of my course. I'm not going to give you all the lecture, but some of the things you can see. That's the way when we do DSC. Actually, this is the way really the heat change is going. We get increase. This is the pre-transition. And then we can see the large increase in the heat capacity through the phase transition, and then we are at the liquid disordered phase. So we start with the liquid, with the solid ordered phase. You can see the structure. The pre-transition here, you can see what was discussed in the first lecture, the change in the orientation of the molecules in the N group and so on. And then we went into a liquid phase. There are changes that we can see by X-ray, that we can see by many other methods, and the things corresponding very, very well. So if we derivatize this to the first derivative, we can get the phase transition. Area under the curve will give us the enthalpy of both, and also we can measure symmetry. And if something will interact with the bilayer, we can see it right away. If the bilayer if there is impurity, phase transition will behave differently, either asymmetric or much broader, and this will be a very good indication. Also indication to interaction with the drug. This just shows you the different phases. I don't want to discuss it too much. Actually, amazing work was done in the 60s by Dennis Chapman. He's the pioneer in this field in the UK. And you can see that's from a book that was written in 1975 that I talked, but the work was done in 1968. And you can see if you hydrate lipid, you can see how phase transitions change with the level of hydration until you reach saturation. And you can get a phase diagram, lipid-water phase diagram, and that's one of the strongest aspects of a DSC. And from this, you can do a lot of calculation. This Morriston, which is really pioneer in this kind of calculation, about the two changes. You can measure the interface between them and how it's related to the phase transition. And I will not go to discuss it in detail. But what we can see here, that's again, that every lipid based on the chain transition, on its chain length, if it's a PC, for example, will have a phase transition at a different temperature, and also the parameter of this phase transition in terms of delta H, for example, of the enthalpy, will increase with the chain length, and this is obvious because the van der Waals interaction become larger and larger, higher and higher, because we have more carbon to interact. And actually, you can see here, again, Morriston, a kind of modeling, that if you look at a little bit above the TTM is 1.01, you can see that the longer the chain, you see that the behavior is very different. Here, we have a lot of a kind of mixture between domain, and here we are almost all of it look like one domain, a very pure domain, which means the phase structure will be very different and the lateral organization of the bilayer will be different. If something interacts with the bilayer, you immediately can look at it through the phase transition, and it can be different kind of molecule. That's a very powerful technique we use. One of the very impressive effects is the effect of cholesterol. Again, Chapman, a paper in 1975, but the work was done in 1968. And you can see very clearly that the more, this is a DPPC. At that time, calorimeters were not a very good machine, so the phase transition did not behave as we get it now, and the lipids were not as pure as they are now, so both make us to get a very broad curve. And you can see the more cholesterol we have, first of all, the effect of the pre-transition, then a very large effect on the main transition, until somewhere between 40 to 50 mol%, we smash completely the phase transition. Recently, actually just very fresh, it's a paper that was done by a Japanese group on a phase diagram of a lipid we use a lot, HSPC with cholesterol. And you can see that the same thing that I showed you before actually happened with the HSPC. HSPC is not a pure lipid. It actually has two components. One is D-stearoyl-PC, and the other is palmitoyl-stearoyl-PC at the ratio of about, well, depends how you calculate, but about 3 to 1, something like that. And therefore, phase transition is a little bit broader. But you can see the effect of cholesterol until at about when mol% of cholesterol is 40 mol%, there is no more phase transition anymore. I want you to remember this for later, and this is the phase diagram. And as I said, when we are above 40 mol%, all the things in the liquid order phase, here we have mixed phases, here we have the liquid disordered phase, and this is the solid phase. And as you see, it's much more complicated than it is. Now, I want to talk about thermodynamic, really revealed to me was really a big surprise because, you know, you're dealing with a system that have about 40 mol% cholesterol. So actually, when you put it in the calorimeter, you expect to see nothing. Well, so I told my postdoc, Chinese postdoc, Xiaowei, which is really a brilliant lady, just put Doxil in the calorimeter. Let's see. No one did it ever. So I was surprised. I couldn't find anything about it. So she put it in the calorimeter. That's the liposome we talked about. I think you already saw the data, so I'm not going to repeat. But we compare actually the liposome without the drug that we made of exactly the same composition and the size by DLS. To the Lipodox. Doxil was unavailable at that time, so we have to work with Lipodox, and actually later we compare it to Doxil, the results are identical. So at the first time when we looked at it, this is the regular condition you work, you hardly see anything when you do a diluted Lipidox. And actually when you increase the sensitivity to the maximum, we start seeing some noise there. So we said, let's take the original Lipodox, put it in the calorimeter, and what you see really was a fantastic surprise. We see two peaks, two endotherms. This is the first one. This is the second one. We didn't know what they are. I mean, we have to look now to find what these are. And if you put the really in a high concentration, this is the original concentration, at a high sensitivity, you can see a very, very nice picture, what's going on there. Anyone can guess what are the two peaks? Okay, let's wait with the surprise. So the first thing we did, well, we said we can make a kind by reverse engineering, reverse the Lipodox, and that's what we did. So we took HSPC alone. You can see it here. There is very nice peak. We know it for many years. did it a long time ago, about 53 degrees. This is the TM, very sharp. Okay, but when we take Lipodox, at a low sensitivity, you see almost nothing. But at the high sensitivity, you see this peak, and then you see a second peak, high temperature peak. So the first question we ask, well, that's already make us suspicious that this peak is related to the lipid, and this peak is related to something else. So we put it in the calorimeter, and now we play games with it. And that's what I said, it's working really 24 hours a day, because you can apply it automatically, go home and come back in the morning and get the data. So if you look carefully, the black one is the first scan, and you see this sharp narrow peak, okay? And then we repeat it again. We did the cooling, and we can see a very large peak here of the cooling, and then we did the second heating, and you can see here the two peaks again. So first of all, although there is hysteresis, but the process is reversible, and I'll show you more details about it later. The blank that we run is the medium of sucrose, which is 10%, the medium that Lipodox is in it, which is 10% sucrose with a little bit of histidine buffer. The same we use for everyone, so all the references are the same. We can calculate the energy of this, and we can see what we expected actually. If you do HSPC alone, there is very high heat involved with the delta H, 10 kilocalories per mole, and delta S also is quite high. When we go to the Lipodox, you'll see later everything much lower, but before, if we just have the lipid alone, this is the lipid alone, we can see that there is a big change, big drop in the delta H, 6-fold, and also very big drop in the delta S. So the cholesterol present here, although transition is remaining, it has a major effect on the order. It's really cholesterol in a way disordering the system quite a lot, and also the van der Waals interaction between the acyl chain is also lowered quite a lot. But to our surprise, the PEG actually energies are higher than you have HSPC cholesterol alone. You can see it here, 1.5 times higher. So the PEG DSPE in a way increase the cooperativity between the molecules. Here you can see very nice the feature of this phase transition, and actually you expect such a phase transition to result with a major leakage. That's always what we anticipate, but we don't have any leakage. We measure it. We took the sample out of the calorimeter after 3-4 scans, and all the doxorubicin remain intact chemically and physically inside the liposomes. This is just the lipid alone to show you how they behave. And here you see more when cholesterol is involved, you can see how it involved. So you can see that there is, on the same amount of lipid, what you get here is larger peak, larger endotherms that you get with the HSPC cholesterol alone. So the PEG has really quite a nice role in affecting the lipid bilayer. And I think it also helped to stabilize it against leakage. So we know that one peak, the lower temperature peak, is related to the lipid. And the question is, we assume that the second peak, which does not appear on lipid alone or liposome alone, is probably related to something else, probably to the drug. This just to show you that you get leakage in any phase transition, but we don't. This is a major leakage of sodium that you get through the phase transition, but we didn't get any leakage here. So that means that still we have a very stable liposome. Even if we go to a higher degree, we went up to 80 degrees, and still it was very, very stable. So the question is it a drug? So what we did something very simple. We took the doxorubicin. I don't want to tell you about the titration. At a certain concentration, and ammonium sulfate at 250 molar, which is the concentration used for Doxil, and we just mix them, and instantaneously we look at, to our naked eye, we can see that there is formation of a gel, very easy to see, and we put this gel in the calorimeter, and we can see a very nice phase transition. This is the doxorubicin sulfate. You can see it first and second transition, actually beautifully reversible processes. Again, some hysteresis between heating and cooling, but very nice. And if you repeat it again, second heating after cooling, again, exactly almost the same peak. And you can see it here, and you can see. But if you take doxorubicin in sodium chloride, you get nothing. Or ammonium chloride, there is no peak. So from this, we know it's related to the sulfate. We did in many other salts. I don't have time to show you. So basically, we know that this peak is related to the crystal formation. And now we can characterize the crystals. And actually, we did a lot of work that I don't have the time to show you. This summarizes just the energetic of what we know about the crystals. And delta S here, it's in joule, because we prepare it for a publication, and they like to get it in joules. But basically, it's the same story again. Phase transition is quite narrow for this gel. It's a fast process, quite symmetric, and very repeatable. So you heat it, you cool it, and it comes back to the same step again. So we solved this mystery about the Doxil, that now we have another very powerful tool to look at Doxil. We can compare different batches, compare different methods of preparation. It's actually, I found it one of the most powerful methods to characterize not only Doxil, we do it now with myocyte, we do it with any liposome, and we can see either the phase transition of the drug or the phase transition of the lipid. Of course, not all of them have. Another system that I'm going to just show you, it's a system of one of my students, Adas, and this worked together with Ganit Danino from the Technion. And actually, these are my cells that were designed for oral delivery of Celcoxib, a very, really one of the blockbusters in the drug market today, which have a lot of activity around because patent is close to its termination. And this drug sold for something like $3-4 billion, so there is a very hot stuff around it. And the problem is that this drug bioavailability is not very good, so we decided to play some games with it, and we used a beta-casein as a carrier. This protein is amphipathic. You see it has the hydrophobic domain, big hydrophobic domain, and small hydrophilic domain. So together it has, here it's the CMC value that actually was determined by ITC. And you can actually, these molecules, because of amphipathy, it's producing a micelles. And this micelle, you can measure, characterize it. And what we did inside this micelle, we found that we can encapsulate the Celcoxib. And this is a paper we published recently, and you can see here that one nice thing is that inside the micelle, not like in the bulk, we have non-crystalline form, and that's much more supposed to be much better from point of view of bioavailability. And indeed it is. We can see that in a pig trial, we can see that we get about twofold better bioavailability of the micelle than of Celebra, which is the common drug sold today by, I don't know, I think Pfizer, but I'm not sure. One of the things that we found that if we incubate it at different temperature, these micelles start to, something happen to them, and at 37 degrees we can start to see some turbidity. We can measure the ratio of turbidity. And then I said to Adas, let's put it in the calorimeter and see what happened. So first of all, we put the beta-casein, and there is no phase transition. Nothing happened. Very boring, but I said, let's put the micelles. And what we see here is opposite to what we saw before. Now, upon heating, we saw an exotherm. And the more drug, the larger is the exotherm. You remember the casein, beta-casein itself, micelle, have no any phase transition. Here there was a phase transition. And actually what was obvious, once you have exotherm upon eating, it means you have something which is metastable. And again, when we decided to scan it in reverse to see if it's reversible, nothing happened anymore. And when we look what happened in the solution after running the DSC, we can see the drug actually left the structure. And actually, it's obvious from the size measurement too, but I don't have time to it. But we can see here that, first of all, the phase transition is affected by the amount of drug. The more drug, the lower is the phase transition. And actually, this explains later the mechanism of action, that at 37 degrees, drug is released in a way that is more bioavailable. And I'd like to thank you very much. Okay, I think you all give up 10 minutes from the break. And Jennifer? No, why not? Come. I want to give few examples and then 1 or 2 examples.